American military history lost deep in the South Pacific. Yesterday, we showed you how the team went looking for the wreck of the USS Hornet. The Japanese sank the aircraft carrier in October of 1942.
The USS Hornet disappeared in 1942, and for over 70 years, her fate became an unsolved mystery. Many believed she was gone forever and swallowed by the Pacific. But technology has a way of dragging ghosts into the spotlight again. When an underwater drone was plunged into the abyss, its cameras locked onto the unthinkable, and history itself seemed to stir. What it found left even hardened historians shocked and terrified to look closer. Could this sunken ghost ship still hold untold stories waiting to be uncovered? What the cameras found makes sense only when you know the history. The Hornet wasn't lost as an ordinary ship. In fact, during her short life, she became a legend, and every rivet of her wreck carries that memory. Let's go back to where it all began, the legend that disappeared. The story of the USS Hornet didn't begin quietly, even if her arrival slipped into the Navy roster without any ceremony. In December 1940, she was launched from the yards at Newport News, Virginia, and by October of the following year, she was already in commission. Officially, she carried the name CV-8, the newest Yorktown-class aircraft carrier. Her lines matched with the earlier ships, Yorktown and Enterprise. The Hornet was sleek, quick through the water, and strong enough to carry an air wing that could change the tide of a battle. Only few at the time knew how quickly she would be put to the test. Her trial by fire came within months of America's entry into World War II. In April 1942, Hornet was chosen for something that felt so impossible. She was made to bring American bombers within striking distance of Tokyo. The idea of launching Army B-25 bombers off the short deck of a carrier seemed reckless. Fuel tanks were extended, every ounce of weight was measured, and the crews were warned that their chances of returning alive were slim. Yet, on the morning of April 18th, 16 bombers roared into the air from Hornet's deck. It was the Doolittle raid, and though the physical damage in Japan was limited, the psychological effect was a lot. For the first time, Japan's home islands were touched by war, and for the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans felt hope return. Well, this was only the beginning. By June 1942, Hornet sailed into the Battle of Midway, one of the most decisive naval clashes in history. She joined Enterprise and Yorktown in striking back against Japan's carrier fleet. Her air groups swarmed into the fight, helping cripple 4 Japanese carriers, which were Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and later Hiryu. Hornet's aircraft also struck at the cruiser Mikuma as the Japanese withdrew. Midway, the back of Japan's naval momentum was broken, and this shifted the balance of power in the Pacific. For Hornet, it was another notch in a record that was growing fast. However, victories at sea never came without heavy cost, and that price was waiting just beyond the horizon. The ship pressed forward into the Solomons, where the fight for Guadalcanal burned day and night. For weeks, Hornet was the only U.S. carrier in the area, with her pilots flying constant missions against Japanese ships and aircraft. Life aboard was so relentless. Every launch and every recovery of battered aircraft reminded the crew that their ship was all that stood between the enemy and the fragile American foothold in the islands. The Hornet had become a workhorse of the Pacific War, but her luck could not last forever. The truth arrived at the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands in October 1942. Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes tore into the Hornet, and their attacks were non-stop. She was hit again and again until fires raged across her deck and pushed the machinery ground to a halt. Her crew fought to save her, but the damage was too severe. Immediately, a decision was made to abandon ship because American destroyers tried to scuttle her with torpedoes, but the Hornet refused to sink. The following day, Japanese destroyers closed in and delivered the final shots that sent her to the depths. Her career lasted only 16 months. In that short span, Hornet had launched one of the most daring raids in history, helped deliver a victory that changed the Pacific, and fought until she could fight no more. She earned 4 battle stars and became the last American fleet carrier to be sunk by enemy fire. This record alone secured her place in history, but what she left behind was something far greater. It's one thing to know a ship is out there. It's another to find it in an ocean that is vast, unpredictable, and merciless to secrets. Yet somewhere in that darkness, a few determined minds believed they could trace her path. But could they really find her? The search. How they looked. For decades, the Hornet existed only in stories and faded photographs. Everyone knew it was lost in the Pacific, but where? And in what condition? No diver had ever come close, and no submarine had never even made the journey. The ocean waters are vast, its depths uncharted, and for 70 long years, it held the Hornet close like something it refused to return. Many believed the carrier would stay lost forever. But that changed when a new generation of explorers took up the search. This wasn't the work of treasure hunters, it was the dream of people who wanted to give history a voice again. The effort came from Paul Allen's team at Vulcan Inc., the same group known for finding other legendary wrecks. Their research vessel, Petrel, wasn't built for comfort or fame. It was built to uncover stories buried down the ocean. And somewhere out there, they believed the Hornet was waiting. The team started on land, not sea. They dug through old Navy archives, cross-checking logbooks, after-action reports, and survivor testimonies because every clue mattered. 9 warships had reported seeing the Hornet in its final hours, and each left a record of coordinates, bearings, radar notes, and rough sketches of the battle. When all those fragments were laid out, they formed a tangled web of numbers and guesswork. Somewhere inside that mess was the truth. For months, they compared each log against the next, correcting small errors, accounting for drift and compass differences. They built detailed maps showing where the Hornet could have gone down, marking zones of probability based on ocean currents and how the carrier might have drifted before it sank. It felt like part science and part instinct. Every decision could either narrow the hunt or send them back to square one. So, because of this, nobody could afford to be wrong. Once the maps were ready, the technology took over. The Petrel carried advanced sonar systems that scanned the seafloor, sending back sound waves that painted an image of what lay below. The operators would watch those readings, looking for anything that broke the smooth surface of the seabed. Down there, a single curve could change everything. However, the sonar could only show so much. To see what was really down there, the team relied on robotic explorers called the Remote Operated Vehicles, ROVs, and Autonomous Underwater Vehicles, AUVs. These machines were built to survive any kind of pressure that would crush steel. They were equipped with cameras, sonar, and sensors that could navigate in complete darkness. Using acoustic positioning and motion tracking, they moved through the black water with precision, scanning every inch of the chosen zone. At that depth, more than 17,000 feet, pressure is lethal to ordinary machines. Any misstep could mean losing sight of a target, or worse, losing the vehicle itself. The currents were unpredictable, and the pressure was enough to destroy anything not perfectly sealed. But the team was prepared, with redundancies, backups, and experienced operators. Everything had to be perfect. On its very first major dive mission, one of the underwater vehicles picked up something. In the sonar return, there was a shape. It was faint at the same time. It was too large and so structured to be a natural formation. The readings showed a long, flat surface and rising angles at the edges, dimensions that could only belong to a warship. Could it really be the Hornet after all these years? Or was it another wreck lost to history? Even though the team was excited, they couldn't celebrate yet. The crew needed proof and thorough verification. The ROV made several passes, filming the object from every direction. At first, it wasn't easy because the footage was dark and grainy, clouded by silt and time. Then the outlines began to take shape. They looked for identification like gun mounts, catapult tracks, and the broken island rising where the bridge used to be. Piece by piece, the evidence began to fit. They compared every image to blueprints of the Hornet, matching details like the angle of the bow, the spacing of the anti-aircraft guns, including the cut of the flight deck. Each match added another piece to the puzzle. If they found an 8 on the hull, that would be a nearly definitive confirmation. Almost immediately, the team prepared to go deeper so as to capture clearer footage of the wreck resting at the bottom of the ocean. Now, this is where the search ends and discovery begins. What shocked everyone? The artifact. When the explorers panned their cameras across the deck, the sight that appeared next made everyone freeze. A 5-inch gun turret still stood proudly, its barrel aimed toward the surface, as though they were waiting for an order that would never come. The weapon hadn't fallen or sunk into the mud. It had endured, a frozen echo of the battle that sent the Hornet to the bottom. The cameras moved on to reveal more. The 1.1-inch anti-aircraft guns were still locked in position. Their mounts, casings, and supports were right where they had been during the fight. Nothing about their arrangement looked random. It felt as if the crew had stepped away for a moment and never returned. The ocean had not scattered them. It had sealed them in place. And then, under the ghostly lights, there was a sight so ordinary on land yet so surreal in this grave of silence. It was an International Harvester aircraft tug that was upright, squared, and perfectly balanced. The small tow vehicle sat still, as if it was waiting to haul another plane into position. Even after how many years of being underwater, its outlines were still sharp. But that wasn't all. Farther along the flight deck, there was something there which made the researchers stop again. This was a Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter with its wings still neatly folded. How the Wildcat fighter was not shattered stunned everyone. Seeing it there, untouched, was like stepping back into October 1942. What was even more haunting were the personal belongings of a human that's still lingering inside. In one corner of the wreck, a jacket hung quietly from a hatchway. In another, a wash kit remained intact, with a toothbrush still visible inside. These weren't artifacts meant for war or operation. They were pieces of daily life, items belonging to men who had once laughed, written letters, or worried about the next strike. The deeper the team looked, the more the ship seemed to breathe with echoes of her past. On her hull, the faint outline of a single number, 8, was still clear. It confirmed what they already knew but could hardly believe. This was Hornet, CV-8. This marking was more than identification. It was a survivor of time itself, a fragile thread tying the present to the ship that helped launch the Doolittle raid and shaped naval history. Every detail told the same story. The Hornet's structure wasn't destroyed beyond comprehension. It was selectively spared. The damage was real and brutal, but certain sections remained astonishingly intact. Standing before the screens, the researchers realized they weren't only studying a shipwreck. They were standing at the threshold of a time capsule that refused to fade. Every frame captured another frozen moment, another unanswered question. How much more of the ship's interior remained preserved? What secrets could still be hidden behind those sealed compartments? And what would they find when they dared to go deeper? The mystery was far from over. The Hornet had revealed her face, but not her heart. And as the cameras turned toward those shadowed openings, one thought lingered in every mind. What else could be waiting down there, untouched since 1942? Interpretation and analysis. When the first images of the wreck appeared on the researchers' monitors, the room went quiet. What they were looking at wasn't a pile of twisted metal. It was a ship that seemed to have frozen in time. The USS Hornet still held her shape in many places, defying the chaos that had sent her to the bottom of the Pacific. For a vessel torn apart by bombs, torpedoes, and fire, her level of preservation was almost unbelievable. It was as if the ocean had decided to keep her secret all these years. Now, how do we interpret and analyze this? You see, the condition of the ship told a story few could have written better than the sea itself. Historical accounts describe how Hornet took hit after hit on October 26, 1942. She literally took 3 bombs, 2 torpedoes, and repeated dive-bombing runs that turned her decks into fire and smoke. Now, lying thousands of feet below, the scars of that battle were still visible. The hull was bent inward where the blasts struck, the plating folded in on itself like paper, and the bridge had snapped away from the main structure. These weren't random breaks. They were evidence of how the ship had fought against gravity and water pressure until she simply couldn't anymore. Also, the bridge told its own story too because it stood apart from the main body, twisted and eerily upright. To experts, that separation meant something more than decay. It suggested that Hornet hadn't collapsed in one violent moment. Instead, she gave way piece by piece as water rushed in and air pockets burst under pressure. It's the kind of detail that turns a wreck into a witness. To understand what made Hornet's preservation remarkable, researchers compared her to other wartime wrecks. The USS Lexington, found earlier by the same team, rests at a shallower depth and shows heavy fragmentation with its pieces scattered across the seafloor. Hornet, by contrast, remains largely whole, despite being deeper and under greater pressure. That difference gives her a rare status. She isn't a ruin scattered by time. She's a time capsule, a steel memory preserved under miles of cold water. Beyond the engineering marvel, the wreck opened doors that records alone could never unlock. The Hornet's war logs describe bomb impacts and flooding, but the wreck shows exactly how the ship bent, cracked, and failed. The buckled plates and torn bulkheads confirm where stress built up and how the hull finally gave in. For naval historians, it's like having a second set of eyewitnesses, but this time, it was made of steel instead of ink. Forensic specialists have begun mapping every blast mark and fracture, studying how different materials aged in extreme cold and darkness. These details can help future engineers understand how ships behave under similar conditions. Every rivet, every split seam tells a part of the story science could never see before. Yet, with each discovery comes a sobering thought. How far should technology go when the wreck is also a grave? That question has guided every decision since the Hornet's rediscovery. Dozens of sailors never made it off the ship. Their remains likely sealed within collapsed compartments, making the site a sacred ground. For researchers, that changes everything. Their mission is not to recover, but to respect and observe. The Hornet doesn't belong to history alone. She belongs to those who never came home. In many ways, the wreck speaks not only of war, but of humanity. The guns, the aircraft, the small items once touched by human hands, all of it adds up to something larger than a naval story. It shows that history isn't always written in words, but sometimes it sleeps beneath the waves, perfectly preserved, waiting for someone brave enough to look and quiet enough to listen. The twisted metal showed how the Hornet died, but not how her crew survived. The truth of what happened next lives in the memory of one man who lived long enough to tell the world what he saw. Human element. The survivors. Deep down the oceans where the Hornet lies, there are stories that steel alone cannot tell. Some of them live through the men who once walked through her decks, men like Richard Nowatzki, whose memories carried the heartbeat of the ship long after her engines went still. When the world learned that the Hornet had been found, Richard was 95 years old. That was literally a lifetime away from the 18-year-old sailor he had been when everything fell apart. Yet when he spoke of that day, his words didn't sound distant. They came alive with the kind of detail that only comes from having lived through the noise, chaos, and the fear. They used armor-piercing bombs. Now when they come down, you hear them going through the decks. Plink, 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 and then, when they explode, the whole ship shakes. He described how bombs pierced deck after deck, how the ship shuddered with each impact. Every echo and sound was etched into his memory. By the time the research team showed him a video of the wreck, Richard found himself face to face with a piece of his own past. The camera panned slowly across the seabed, revealing a gun mount he immediately recognized. This was the very position he had once manned during Hornet's final stand. Seeing it there, perfectly preserved beneath miles of water, was like watching time open its hand. For a man who had survived what many did not, it was more than discovery. It was a reunion. And even in the heaviness of the moment, Nowatzki's spirit didn't lose its spark. "If you go down to my locker, there is $40, you can have it," he joked. That small line of humor cut through the sorrow, to show that even amid loss, laughter still finds a way to live. Yet behind the smile lingered a truth he didn't need to say aloud, the kind that stays between sailors and ghosts. Because the truth is, the Hornet's story is not one of discovery alone. It's also one of sacrifice. About 140 crewmen never made it home after that final day in October 1942. Their lives ended in the fire, the water, and the collapse of steel. The wreck, for all its preservation, is a tomb. We can call it a place where bravery and tragedy are forever joined. For the survivors and their families, the wreck's discovery offered something that had been missing for more than 70 years: closure. The Hornet was no longer lost. She had a resting place, and the men who never came back were with her. To the U.S. Navy, Hornet remains a symbol of courage and grit. This was the ship that launched the Doolittle raid, a mission that took war to Japan's doorstep at a time when few thought it possible. To historians, she's a floating time capsule, revealing not just the machinery of war, but the human cost behind it. As video from the expedition made its way around the world, it stirred something deeply human. The researchers, many of them far too young to have lived through that war, found themselves moved by what they saw on their screens. It wasn't only about engineering or discovery anymore, it was about the quiet dignity of those who fought and fell. The sea, in its stillness, had kept their story safe. It had become both witness and guardian. Yet, for all the emotion and reverence this discovery carried, the mission itself came with its own share of danger. Finding a ship more than 3 miles below the ocean's surface was no simple task. It required precision, nerve, and a bit of faith in the unknown. What did it take to reach her? What risks did the crew face in chasing a ghost beneath the waves? That's where the story goes next. Technical challenges and risks. Exploring the wreck of the USS Hornet wasn't a simple descent into history. It was a high-stakes fight against a world that resists human reach. At more than 17,000 feet below the surface, the ocean is not a silent blue dream. It's a crushing, merciless pressure zone where every mistake can destroy years of work in seconds. Down there, steel bends, circuits fail, and no one can come to the rescue. The first challenge was surviving that pressure. At those depths, the weight of the water above equals nearly 8 tons on every square inch. Each joint, bolt, and wire on the submersible had to hold steady or risk being flattened. Engineers tested titanium shells and pressure housings again and again, knowing that one weak point could end the mission. Even the tiny rubber seals protecting the electronics had to be flawless. One drop of seawater could short out an entire control system. The deeper they planned to go, the thinner the line between exploration and disaster became. Navigation posed another silent danger. Once the vehicle slipped down the surface, GPS stopped working entirely. There was no map, no sunlight, no up or down. The crew relied on acoustic beacons and a web of inertial sensors to chart their path. Sonar served as their only sense of direction, bouncing sound waves through the dark to reveal faint outlines of the Hornet buried under layers of silt. Each ping from the sonar felt like a heartbeat in the dark, proving that they were still on track and still alive in a place built to erase all signals. On another spectrum, communication was another struggle. Every command sent from the ship above took precious seconds to reach the submersible, and every video feed had to fight its way through miles of heavy water. The images arrived broken and delayed, flickering through static and shadows. When the signal dropped, the operators on deck were left in silence, staring at blank screens, waiting for the ocean to give their robot back. That delay turned every maneuver into a leap of faith. Also, the risks weren't only digital, they were physical risks too. The wreck of the Hornet, torn apart by war and time, was a maze of broken beams and razor-edged debris. One wrong move could snag a cable or shatter a propeller. Even on the seafloor, Slow underwater currents could shift the vehicle and push it dangerously close to the wreck's remains. Each movement had to be deliberate, with every inch being measured against risk. Remember, down there, the ocean gives no second chances. To minimize failure, the team built backup systems for nearly everything. They had backup for power, cameras, communications, and navigation. The engineers knew they couldn't simply go fix it if something failed. Repairs had to be remote, improvised, and precise. They rehearsed these contingencies over and over until every team member could respond to failure like muscle memory. It was precision under pressure, not just from the ocean, but from the knowledge that one mistake could bury the mission forever. The environment added more weight to their worries. The cold down there, hovering near freezing, could drain batteries in half the expected time. Even alloys designed for durability began to corrode in the salt-laden dark. Deep-sea organisms covered the wreck in a film of life that made it slippery and unpredictable. Everything like the cables, propellers, and even the robotic arms had to endure the strain of long exposure. And now, let's talk about the human side that was so demanding. These missions went on for days, sometimes weeks, under tight schedules and little sleep. The crew worked in close quarters on the research ship, and their nerves pulled thin by exhaustion and constant focus. Each decision carried consequences. Every time they sent the sub down, they were gambling against distance, pressure, and time. There was no room for error, except careful moves and quiet confidence. And yet, success brought its own risk, in fact. The Hornet is considered a war grave, meaning parts of it must remain untouched out of respect for those who died there. Engineers had to ensure that their sonar pulses and propeller wash wouldn't disturb the sediment or collapse fragile structures. Every move had to balance curiosity with reverence. The ocean floor is not a museum display. It's a resting place. And every action mattered. Having honored the past, what comes next? What does this discovery mean for history, future explorations, and for us? Aftermath and significance. When Vulcan Inc. and the U.S. Navy officially confirmed that the wreck found resting deep in the South Pacific was indeed the USS Hornet, it didn't come with a grand announcement or media spectacle. It was done quietly, almost reverently, as though they were delivering news to the past itself. The Navy shared that the ship lay about 17,500 feet below the surface, near Solomon Island. However, one vital detail remained locked away. The exact coordinates of the wreck would stay secret, known only to a few. The decision wasn't about mystery, it was about protection. That careful balance between discovery and respect shaped everything that followed. For historians, engineers, and preservationists, the find was a goldmine of knowledge. To naval architects, it was like getting a textbook written by time itself. Museums began exploring ways to bring this story to the public through virtual dives, detailed 3D models, and interactive exhibits that allow people to explore the Hornet from the comfort of their own homes. Still, beyond the data and science, the discovery changed what people believed was possible. For years, explorers thought ships that sank at such crushing depths were gone forever. But the Hornet's rediscovery shattered that belief. It showed that with the right mix of technology, patience, and courage, the so-called impossible depths could be reached. Of course, finding the Hornet also came with great responsibility. The wreck is officially recognized as a U.S. Navy war grave, which means it must be treated with the same dignity as any cemetery. The Sunken Military Craft Act protects it from unauthorized recovery or exploration. No artifacts can be taken, no sealed compartments can be opened, and no propeller can disturb the silt that's settled there for decades. The ocean may have claimed her, but the Navy still watches over her. Modern monitoring systems now ensure the site stays safe from looters and accidental damage. There's also something deeply humbling about the whole thing. Seeing the Hornet again after decades down the waves stirs a sense of awe. It's proof of human ingenuity and fragility side by side. We can build machines capable of reaching the bottom of the ocean, but we still stand small before the power of nature. The ocean swallowed one of the most legendary carriers in American history. And yet, after all this time, she remains there, showing us that no story is ever completely lost. Now, as history rises from the deep, the question lingers in every explorer's mind. How far are we willing to go to uncover the rest of what the ocean has yet to tell? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. To enjoy more content like this, click on the next video on your screen.